More people, more goods, and more services are crossing borders today than ever before. And 3/4 of this global trade is controlled by a few nations. Together, they produce 80% of the world's total economic output too. They call themselves the G20. It's a self-styled collegium and one of the most powerful clubs in the world. This is their story. Crisis in the financial world provoked its birth. The year was 1999, the Asian financial crisis. Roaring economies of Southeast Asia collapsed one after another, and the crisis spread to other parts of the world. The group of G20 was announced by the finance ministers of G7, another forum exclusively of the capitalist bloc. The countries included were Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, UK, and the US. The European Union also got a seat, making it G20. It was supposed to act as a platform to unite finance ministers and central bankers, but it remained a less serious grouping. 9 years later, another financial crisis erupted, this time in the heart of capitalism.
The American financial system is rocked to its foundation as top Wall Street institutions topple under a mountain of debt.
Collapse in the US housing market caused severe contraction of liquidity in global financial markets, the worst crisis ever since the Great Depression of 1930s. The capitalist bloc was shell-shocked. Since then, the G20 leaders have met regularly, and the G20 has become the central forum of international economic cooperation. Saving capitalism at the highest political level is the mission. How does it work? The G20 is not a permanent institution with officers, secretariat, or staff. The agenda and activities are all decided by the rotating presidencies in consultation with member countries. To ensure continuity, the system of Troika is in place. The Troika consists of the current host country, its predecessor, and its successor. The next presidency of 2023 will be held by India. The G20 meetings happen in three major streams. The finance track, where the primary focus is on global economic and financial issues. Finance ministers and the central bank governors from nations meet year-round at the ministerial level. Outcomes are brought at the annual G20 summit to take the final call. The Sherpa track focuses on broader issues of importance, like political engagement, gender equality, trade, pandemic, climate change, disaster resilience, migration, and so on. The G20 has also created engagement groups to achieve wider participation from different civil society stakeholders. They are supposed to work as autonomous independent groups free from the governments. But there is more than what appears to the bare eye.
More growth.
Very often, the presidents of the IMF and World Bank are ex officio invitees to the G20. Their pro-North die-hard neoliberal positions and being controlled by the US, UK, and EU make the summit's outcome almost predictable.
What excuse should we give for the failure? In the words of that Caribbean icon Eddie Grant, will they mourn us on the front line? When will we, as world leaders across the world, address the pressing issues that are truly causing our people angst and worry, whether it is climate or whether it is vaccines?
The failure of COP26 last year. The G20 nations failed to advance credible solutions for climate change. Meanwhile, a justice-based energy transition framework always gets sabotaged. In both cases, northern nations save a lot of money. And the whole world knows about the scheme of things. Thus, we see every year, summit after summit, people's movements swarming into the venue, protesting and calling their bluff. We don't need data to understand how people are struggling with food and energy price increases all over the global south. After the mayhem in Sri Lanka, the crisis is spreading through Ghana, Ecuador, and many other places.
There's no food and fuel, and the currency cedi is crumbling due to rising inflation.
The governments are already shifting key resources from essential public services and social protection to repay their creditors, putting people's survival at risk. The debt crisis is already upon us. Many are calling for the G20 to step up their response to the crisis, be it the Bali summit or the upcoming one in New Delhi. But it is unlikely, while a blame game is going on for some time.
After about 2 hours of listening to all the assemblies,
The G7 and the Paris Club are taking turns to blame China for blocking reforms to improve the G20's common framework. China points at the multilateral institutions, particularly the World Bank, for not providing their share of debt relief. The World Bank and IMF point back at China for the lack of transparency in their debt operations. And no one seems to notice that the big problem is the private creditors' lack of engagement in debt relief. The G20 and the G7, both creditor-dominated forums, want to keep their decision-making power in the global economic governance. So when it comes to issues like the debt crisis of the nations, the responses end up being fatal for the people of the global south. Absence of most of the developing nations in the forums make it even easier. As the saying goes, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. Will anything change when India assumes the presidency for the year 2023? Or will it float with the developed nations? The G20 host plays a major role in setting the agenda for the year. But we cannot expect much from a government which has already embraced neoliberalism and is part of the international financial capital. Meanwhile, we are nearing a crisis of unimaginable scale on multiple fronts. Decision of these forums means life or death to many. We cannot be mute spectators. Get involved. Learn, educate, raise questions, and be a part of the common quest for solutions.